Welcome to today's webinar at FUEs Labs, Migration to S4HANA. So we'll sum up what's going on the S4HANA migration strategies, what clients are thinking about, what you should look into to be well prepared for your migration to S4HANA. So let's start with it. Migration to S4HANA. What is the background? It is still the most important issue that clients are dealing with today. Thinking about how to organize, how to plan their migration to S4HANA, the change in licenses, the project that stands in front of you, the changes in digital access, the changes in the products. Will you get a return on investment? And now especially SAP pushing for RISE with SAP. So should I go there? Should I stick with the S4HANA Perpetual licenses? What can I do? Always still important, the user licenses. So what you can see here is basically when you have 100 user licenses today, it is likely that you will get an optimization potential when you haven't used tools before of somewhere between 10 and 40% in the overall costs of the user licenses. When you move to S4HANA, the optimization potential increases even more because SAP has given many of the user types in S4HANA additional use rights, and this will help you to even lower the costs if you do it appropriately and prepare as you should with that, analyzing the activity of the users. So we have here SAMQ Advisory Queue, tools that are predetermined to help you in going this trip, in preparing your contracts, assessing your costs, and be well prepared for the S4HANA change. But first of all, let's understand and see the options about the operating models that we have. So the contracting options. Number one, where are you today? Let's say you are on ECC today, but even if you would be on S4HANA Perpetual licenses in the future, you can decide to have your own infrastructure team and your own data center. You will have your own SAP Basis team, and you have someone managing all of this infrastructure, work, the licenses, the contracts all together. Now, some clients have already made a so-called lift and shift, which is basically installing the installation, migrating the installation as it is from your own data center into a hyperscaler infrastructure. So you have suddenly a dynamic infrastructure that you can adapt and optimize so that it matches the actual usage of your servers. You purchased 2 big servers in the beginning or rented them with, say, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. And now you see that you are not totally using the performance or the memory, then you can adapt them to where you are now. And then you have eventually a hyperscaler partner taking care of your application managed services, companies such as Accenture, Capgemini, others, Lemongrass, Syntax, who are experts in managing SAP applications, doing all the SAP basis work, backups, starting of transports, the carrying of the batch jobs, all the modifications, updates that you have in your systems. Now, with a RISE with SAP subscription, you're buying an all-in-one solution with some differences, though. Number one, the infrastructure that you will get with RISE with SAP is a fixed infrastructure. You can't optimize it. If you agree with SAP on getting this sizing of servers, you're likely to have to stick with this sizing of servers over the next years. And then talking about application managed services, eventually you used to have your internal staff taking care of this. Now, in this case, you will get some kind of an offshoring. So it's access to an environment of people where you can enter in the SAP portals, your inquiries, your change requests, and someone in another part of the world will take care of them and help you in changing what you have. This is complemented by SAP's so-called CAS or CAS or Cloud Application Services. So some services are included in RISE with SAP, others can be contracted externally or not externally, but as an add-on to your RISE with SAP product. Now, Other clients have RISE with SAP, but don't contract cloud application services with SAP, but still contract a local application managed services provider because they find this a better option. So in both ways, with Perpetual or with cloud licenses, you can decide who will take care of the bulk of the work when it comes to managing your systems. So next one, what else do we have on the table? The key points and the things that you need to worry about is RISE with SAP the right choice and the right setup of services, infrastructure, and software model for me? What are the framework conditions that will influence my setup of products, my setup of infrastructure, my whole SAP environment? Do I want to go to the cloud? Am I ready to go to the cloud? Am I ready to integrate all of my applications that are connected to SAP today on premise and rebuild all of these connections to a cloud environment? Some work to do there, has advantages and disadvantages. Nevertheless, you have to take care of it. Digital access, we will get into that later, still something to take care of. And the license requirements for the next years are determined today before you even change your contract. You need to optimize, you need to understand what you need in the future, how many user licenses of which types you need, because unless you optimize this environment, you will basically migrate your problems. And especially when we talk about RISE with SAP, the so-called full user equivalence, which is the new user licensing model, has a high impact on the overall costs or total cost of ownership of RISE with SAP. So it stays something important to measure, to dimension correctly the user licenses that you have. And you need to make a strategic decision on whether you want to stick with a software purchase, a maintenance model, or rather migrate to an OPEX or subscription-based model as with RISE with SAP. It is important in the negotiation that you have in front of you to understand what are the cost drivers here. What things can I influence? What things can't I influence? I have them, there is no way to change the costs. And what are also the pieces that are show the highest costs in my bill of materials, but also in the overall strategy. So infrastructure, application managed services, are they correctly dimensioned? Do I have the right number of licenses? Do I have the right dimension of database? Do I need HANA Enterprise, or could I cope with the runtime version of HANA? These are some of the questions that you will need to look into over the next time. So the first step to get there is, of course, understand your inventory. What have we purchased from SAP over the last 10 to 20 years? So how can you approach this? First of all, your products. Download from SAP for Me your list of products, compare this with your contracts and make sure they are aligned. Sadly, in occasions, they are not perfectly aligned. So clear whatever differences you have between SAP for Me and what you think you have. Identify the shareware. This is nothing that you can measure. You will measure engines that show a certain measurement. That doesn't mean you're using them. So discuss with your business units what products you're still using and which not. Which not is important because you don't want to migrate those. You want to rather exchange the value of these products for the additional costs that you will have with S/4HANA. Analyze the user licenses. We already said that. Analyze your infrastructure costs. So if you're considering migrating to RISE with SAP, but also if you stick with S/4HANA Perpetual plus an application managed service provider, you need to understand what will change. If I have internal stuff taking care of that, can I reduce the costs by going to an external AMS provider? Can I optimize the costs when I go to RISE with SAP? Check that. And analyze the application managed services. Now, you don't get the same from different providers, especially in the area of RISE with SAP. It is somehow a standardized service. And for some clients, it fits perfectly. For others, it doesn't at all. So you need to go down and really look into the details of these service descriptions. Where do I want to go? The future forecast, it is about identifying the products that you will need in the future, but also understanding what will change in the product set. Do I have projects in front of me that will eventually create new value for the company? Also, with S/4HANA, both RISE with SAP and S/4HANA Perpetual, you have new functions in the tools that you should evaluate in terms of return on investment. For instance, we have heard of some clients that the tax model in the US, the tax handling that S/4HANA is offering, brings functions that can really cause relevant additional return on investment. Prove that. Prove if extended warehouse management would bring additional value, this would bring additional value. So look into discrepancies in what you have today and what you're planning to get in the future, also to find the justification to move on to S/4HANA and finance this product. Another thing that we need to look into is financial scenarios. Now, when we are comparing costs and comparing different situations with different cost components, first of all, we need to align the comparison and make sure we are not comparing pears and apples. So it is about understanding the concept of total cost of ownership. What overall costs do I have when I'm using SAP? I have regular costs. It is my software, it is my infrastructure, it is my application managed services. And then I have one-time recurring costs, not recurring, but costs that come every once in a while, so project-oriented costs. And eventually I have functional application maintenance that mostly is done by internal people, complemented with some external consultants, understand the overall costs. Now, in this particular situation with S/4HANA, it is not about the running costs alone, but you have to bring into the invoice the fact that you will have migration costs, and this is something that you need to divide over the next 5 years until you can deduce those costs from taxes. Okay, we have a tool here, AdvisorQ, that will help you set up these complete scenarios that will remind you of what you need to have in costs and help you not forgetting anything in this context. So digital access, what happened here? Different situations. Now we have clients who have agreements with SAP on user-based licensing for indirect access, or they pay sales orders, service orders, purchase orders. Apparently that doesn't exist anymore in SAP S/4HANA RISE with SAP. At a certain point in time, SAP declared to the German user group that digital access would still be optional even under S/4HANA Perpetual at the time. When they said that, when they wrote that, we don't know about RISE with SAP because they haven't expressed themselves about it. But we can prove that SAP declared that under S/4HANA Perpetual, you could still choose between user-based licensing or digital access. Anyway or the other, you need to prove the risk of digital access, how relevant it is. Moreover, with SAP pushing for the Business Technology Platform, BTP, make sure that you have an agreement that prevents you from paying digital access or indirect use for any applications that you developed under BTP. Although it seems obvious, it isn't. We have seen situations where clients are discussing with their salespeople on whether they would have to pay for sales support applications that they self-developed and now be paying digital access for those. So make clear you are under the right opinion and that you have this thing cleared in your contract. Now under S/4HANA, the sales and service orders, purchase orders, they disappear. You don't have them anymore. So you would need to exchange those products against digital access. And now we have a new measurement method. We have SAP Passport. And remember, SAP has the digital access adoption program with a 90% discount. This has been prolonged forever, so to say. This 90% discount is not always something that you're being told remember it's there and you need to make use of it if you decide to buy digital access. So SAP Digital Access is not included in the full user equivalence. You need to be aware of that. So what more changes? SAP is like still shaping their human resources or human capital management strategy. And although many of us thought that SuccessFactors would replace anything on the main ERP product, we now see that we have a new HR product or HCM for S4HANA with different modules that you can see here on the slide. So whatever you had before on HR and payroll, you have new products with new metrics, new licensing methods. This will eventually increase the costs and you need to estimate what will happen in this environment. The product conversion is something that SAP made disappear since end of June this year. So we had a project, S4HANA Enterprise Management for ERP customers. When you bought this product at some $10,000, you had the option to exchange one by one at no cost your ECC products against S4HANA products. Now, this option has disappeared now, so we only have the contract conversion in our hands now, meaning you will take 90% of the value of your actual ECC licenses and exchange them for value for S4HANA licenses, meaning it is likely that the S4HANA licenses will be a bit more expensive, that you will have to pay something in addition, but you will get credit for everything that you purchased in the past, at least 90% of it. So no more product conversion, only contract conversion from now on. And you need to make the math very thoroughly in terms of, okay, I'm changing money for money, but what products do I actually need? The product set may have changed over the last 10 years, and that's important to really get the products that you need now. So what does it look like now? You take your current maintenance space, you add the total new S4HANA product set to that, and then eventual new products, new projects that you are adding to that. And this is basically the part that you're negotiating, the difference between where you were before with ECC on your maintenance space and where you will be now, which is likely to be higher. Now, how much higher? In my opinion, and looking at what we've seen in the market, well, I would expect something around 10 to 20% in additional costs, not counting new products, of course, meaning products that you didn't have functionally before. And this is also the basis for your negotiation. I mean, in the end, we are talking about a major product update. Major, but update. It is not a new product. It is not a new set of functions. It is still an ERP system. So let's say you would not be migrating to S4HANA, but you would be migrating to Oracle Cloud Financials. So you had ECC on SAP, now you're migrating to S4HANA, to Oracle. How much more are you willing to pay for a new software of which you expect that brings new functionality that is better than what you had before? Well, something more than what you paid before, eventually, but maybe not that much more. So what I'm saying here is don't ever accept a scenario or a proposal that suggests for your costs to be doubled, because this is not what we are looking for. The next thing we need to look into, the full user equivalence. Now, one of the disadvantages of subscription-based models is you can't stop paying. It's a rental. When you stop renting the car, you don't have a car. So you need to buy one or start from scratch or rent a new one, etc. But you are at the expense of whatever the supplier does with its prices. And we have an issue here. If you look at the prices for RISE with SAP from the beginning of 2021, where it was 215 euros, similar things on the dollar side, it went up 2022 up to 365, Now in 2023 Q2, we are already at $398. If I get it right, we are almost talking about doubling the price. Now, this may be a big issue unless you cut this off strictly in your contract. And not only for the contract duration time, where SAP right now is trying to balance the inflation of the last years by imposing you an increase of 3.5% per year, but also limiting the growth of the cost increases for renewals of your contract in the future. Make sure you have an agreement there, because else you are at the free will of SAPs and their own constraints on prices and companies' development. Apart from that, something new that SAP came up with is the STAR assessment. It is a simple, in my eyes, all too simple tool to help clients assess how many users do I need in the future. They will give you a questionnaire, set up an interview for you to fill out what roles and authorizations you have in your company, how is the setup, and define based on this the quantity of full user equivalents that you would need on RISE with SAP. Please, please don't go there. Now, if we look back into history, the concept of licensing, setting up licenses, assigning licenses to users based on roles and authorizations was developed by SAP together with a large car manufacturer. The same car manufacturer decided 3 years later to go away and go back to an activity-based license assignment or license or user classification model. Why is that? Because it's all too expensive. So just make use of tools like ours, here SAMQ, when it comes to really assessing the activity of your people and assessing what license types they will need. If you do not do so, you are likely to overspend by a lot. What we have seen in the differences between SAP proposals on the full user equivalent side and the actual use of the client is sometimes a difference of 100%. So make sure you get this right. So license costs and calculations examples, let's look at that. How do you get there? First of all, we are talking about comparing what you have today. Eventually, you're already on a hyperscaler or on a local data center. Then you want to compare this with the S/4HANA Perpetual licenses on your own data center, on a hyperscaler, and RISE with SAP. Now, don't do the error of comparing RISE with SAP with, say, 40% discount with S/4HANA Perpetual with a 20% discount. I mean, somehow the discount levels must be balanced. How do you approach that? Well, measure the discount that you got in the past from SAP on ECC and apply the same discount to your S/4HANA Perpetual license proposal. If you don't have access to price lists, we can give you estimations on where you would come out, because you need to do a proper and fair comparison between the two options. In the end, these are options, and it is you who decides, not the one who's selling you the software. Keep that in mind. So we have our tools. We have VoQUZ, which was specifically designed to help you go through this process. VoQUZ gives you insight into the total cost of ownership of the different financial scenarios that are specific for you, with your specific bill of materials, with your specific application managed service costs, migration costs, infrastructure costs. We can develop the single financial scenarios and give you a view on the overall operating costs of SAP. And that's very important to get there. So you need to not only consider the comparison on the cost side, which we will help you doing here, but also on the service side. Also here, VoQUZ helps you assessing the different services that you have there and what are the difference between SAP's application managed services and what you're getting today from your team, from an external team. And same goes for the infrastructure costs. We can give you assessments on how much is an AWS infrastructure for an XS size RISE environment and the comparable environment as for HANA Perpetual, for instance. So here you see a scenario where we have S/4HANA on-premise with a company called Syntax, who is offering, in this case, the application managed services. It is a 3-tier environment in this case with production, quality, and development. But we can change that. We can change any factor and set all of these scenarios in a way that you can understand them, that you can present them to non-IT specialists, such as your CEO, and make the differences very understandable. Because it is likely that SAP will approach your CEO too and put the pressure on digitalization and modernization, and everything is done by RISE with SAP. Well, make this a bit more objective by showing all the sides. You need to look into the strategic issues like your level of captiveness from SAP, into the cost side of it, into the service quality side of it. So bring in all the factors in the decision. What do you get from us? Well, you get from Focus Labs the user license assessment to make sure that you won't be overbuying when you migrate to S/4HANA. You get from us price indications for AMS, so application managed services, so that you have a market comparison there. You get infrastructure costs for hyperscalers, and particularly AWS and Azure. And you can see what this will cost you if you go in that direction. And we help you understanding the inventory, the differences in costs, etc. This is where SAMQ helps us understanding where you are today with your costs, what products you need, what products you don't need. On the next slide, what we can see is with VisoriQ, once we have the status quo of where we are today, with VisoriQ, we plan for the future. So we start setting up the financial scenarios, putting together all the cost components, comparing the service quality and the service scope on the different areas, and also assessing the terms and conditions of your contract by giving you indications of what other clients have negotiated successfully with SAP and things that will protect you in the future and make sure that you get the best contract possible. So SAMQ and VisoriQ are 2 tools that you need to have when you're migrating to S/4HANA, be it a RISE with SAP or S/4HANA Perpetual. Make the comparison, make the proper measurements, and make sure that you will get the best possible contracts over the next years with SAP. A wonderful product that is still developing, that is still coming up with new ideas and new things on how to support your company, but you need to get the contracting and the license management right in this context. Thank you very much for today. I hope this will help you, and we are at your disposal if you have further questions, if you would like to know how we can support you on your trip to S/4HANA. And now we will go over to the questions and answers session supported by my colleagues. Thank you very much.
So hi everyone, thanks very much for attending. I think you saw from Francisco's presentation lots of things to consider when we're talking about moving to S/4HANA or RISE. There haven't been any questions asked, which is absolutely fine, of course. But I do want to give you one additional piece of information to consider. In the last few days, SAP have announced that the contract conversion that Francisco spoke about in the presentation and the 90% discount, that's actually been reduced now. The 90% discount has been reduced to 80% as of July 2023 and is being reduced progressively over the next few years. This is a major difference. Obviously, SAP is trying to persuade customers to move to RISE, and I guess it's questionable whether reducing the benefit of your existing licenses is going to drive people to RISE. but that obviously seems to be the intention. But just another thing to bear in mind when you consider your options. A couple of questions have turned up. Unfortunately, we can't share the deck, but please feel free to reach out. I've got your name here. I can send you lots of information about the subject matter, no problem whatsoever. Why do you say not to use the STAR report? Our recommendation is never to give SAP information that you would rather keep to yourselves. Whilst I know that SAP says that this information won't be used for audit purposes and won't be used to alter the negotiation with SAP, our recommendation, as I mentioned, is still to keep this information close to your chest, and to make sure that you have all the information at hand when you negotiate with SAP, rather than giving it to them. That's our suggestion. What does that say? When one should migrate to RISE? It's a $1 million question, isn't it? The bigger question is RISE the right fit for your organization? So you really need to do all this analysis first before you can answer that question. I'm sorry, I can't give a better answer than that about when. I think the bigger question is if, and there's lots of work to be done before you can answer the if question. What would be the software if we use ECC and SRM? I'm not quite sure I understand that question. I'll come back to that individually later. There's a question here about, do we have any comparisons between RISE with the public cloud and a public cloud? So the answer is yes. That's obviously another detailed conversation, but I can certainly reach out to you individually around that. That's no problem whatsoever. And it seems that's the end for now. Obviously, you registered for this event. You will receive a follow-up from us. All of my colleagues are more than open to have one-on-one conversations with you. So please feel free to reach out, and we'll speak to you all soon. Thank you again. Thank you again for attending. Thanks, everyone.